Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 36. There are no doubles or blanks for the remainder of the season as covered in my recent podcast, and I'll also be discussing my final team in tomorrow's deadline stream, so be sure not to miss it. There could also be a reaction stream headed your way, and then all the usual content for Gameweek 37. And towards the end of this month, I'll be doing UCL fantasy videos once more, the best team, my own team selection, and another deadline stream on the 31st of May, ahead of the Champions League final. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. We recently hit 33,000 subscribers in the recent UCL Fantasy deadline stream, so thank you very much for your support. And to all the members and patrons, we also reached over 100 members on YouTube alone, and a big up to Paredes and Napstars for gifting many memberships in the recent deadline streams. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the other links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. But let's get straight into this podcast, building the best 15-man squad on the wildcard. My squad value has gone down by 0.2 million overnight, with Mateta and Salah dropping in price, but it's still a decent value overall. I've got 101.6 million with my 15-man squad and 2.8 million in the bank, but it's all team dependent and it depends on when you bought certain players and also your spending power, which you can see on websites like FPL Team. But let's start off with the two goalkeepers, and some familiar faces will be reintroduced. There has been a drop-off in FPL output from Pickford and Sells, the two best goalkeepers in Fantasy Premier League, but both of them will make it into this wildcard squad. And if you have the bench boost, I think this goalkeeper combination could really help you to get a very high score using that chip in Gameweek 37. You can't use two chips at the same time, so you wildcard in Gameweek 36 and then bench boost in Gameweek 37. If those are your remaining chips, that'll be my recommendation in terms of how to best utilize them, and others will have different chips flying about. Maybe the assistant manager, for example, you definitely want to use it now. But unfortunately, if you got 3 or 4 chips and one of them is the assistant manager, that means one of those chips will be burned. But with the wildcard, it enforces permanent changes to your squad, and ideally you'd use it a little bit earlier in the season and get at least 5+ weeks from it. But I still think it can be really well utilized now in Gameweek 36, and Sells faces Leicester at home this week, and Pickford hosts Southampton in Gameweek 37. So I think if you've got the funds and you're willing to spend over 10 million on the goalkeeper position, going for Sells and Pickford is a great choice. At this point of the campaign, you want to go for differentials, and that could be with low ownership, as you can find with Nico Williams, who has around 4% at the time of this recording, or even with your structure. Instead of just having Sells to cover Nottingham Forest defensively, you can also go for Nico Williams and potentially go for a Nottingham Forest triple-up, which looks very appealing for Gameweek 36, facing Leicester at home, and that's where one of Aina or Milenkovic could come in. And my preference does remain Milenkovic despite his recent blanks and also poor performances in certain scenarios, but I think having all 3 of them at the same time, starting against Leicester, is a great differential play, and I'd highly recommend it to those wildcarding in Gameweek 36. Next up is going to be another defensive double up here, which you might be surprised about, and I wouldn't start both of them in Gameweek 36 per se, but in Gameweek 37, either on the bench boost or if you're starting 11, you can go for Jake O'Brien and also complement Pickford that way. But it is no secret that Everton have regressed defensively under David Moyes, and they're not prioritising that defensive stability and the clean sheets as they were under Sean Dyche. So this is really a play to tackle Southampton at home in Gameweek 37, and that looks really appealing on the bench boost. But let's complete this defensive line with 2 other options, and Gvardiol is one of them. Rotation could be an issue with all Man City assets, and that includes the Croatian in this position, but he is starting every single game for Pep Guardiola's side, and mainly as a centre-back in the recent matches since I bought him on the Gameweek 30 wildcard. But the FPL returns have still been good, with more clean sheets for Man City, and when that has been the case, Gvardiol is able to get 2 or 3 bonus points. He delivered 8 points overall in Gameweek 35 in that 1-0 victory over Wolves, and against Man United in a goalless draw, he delivered 9 points on that particular occasion. So I think Gvardiol is a good investment and the best premium defender at this point of the game. And the final option is Aït-Nouri for the attacking threat. I don't see many clean sheets for Wolves, but they have been surprising under Vitor Pereira, keeping more clean sheets than expected and having some of the best defensive numbers in the Premier League. And Aït-Nouri can combine a clean sheet with a goal and or an assist, so there are many avenues to points there with the Algerian wing-back, and I think this defensive line is very solid. You are kind of going all in on Nottingham Forest and Everton, which you might be a little bit reticent about, and I completely understand that. You may want to diversify that a little bit with a differential like Sessegnon facing Everton at home in Gameweek 36. You might still back Arsenal in Gameweek 38 against Southampton away, so you can go for Raya in goal, or maybe Saliba, Timber, or a different option in that defensive line. But I'm very happy with these options, and I think you've got great chances of keeping a clean sheet in Gameweek 36, 37, and 38. Jarrod Bowen is no longer a differential per se, but 11.8% is a decent figure. So in terms of EO, effective ownership, any returns he does get will actually lead to green arrows and also significant rises in your mini league. So I do think Bowen is still worth investment at this point. Facing Man United away, you might argue that last week would have been a better time to buy him against Tottenham at home, but I look at those last two game weeks, particularly Ipswich Town away in Gameweek 38, and I think Bowen could be a great differential captain on that particular occasion. So I do like Jarrod Bowen still in this midfield, and a template is forming in this position. Now, speaking of which, Bryan Mbeumo has much higher ownership, and most people will have him in terms of those on YouTube, X, and those that are still at a high rank in Fantasy Premier League. And he's a great captaincy option this week against Ipswich Town away from home as well. And I do like Mbeumo. Despite the slightly disappointing return against Man United last week, I still think he is one of the best assets in the game, and his consistency has been remarkable. Just like Jarrod Bowen, but Mbeumo also has penalties, and he plays in an even better team with solid underlying stats throughout the entire campaign. Let's also go for Kevin De Bruyne as a massive differential, you could say, in terms of EO once more. And not buying him in Gameweek 35 was quite costly for me personally, but I think if you can build this sort of midfield with Mbeumo, Bowen and De Bruyne, you're well set for the rest of the campaign. The only concern here would be rotation once more, and I think the same applies to Marmoush up front with Erling Haaland knocking on the door, and even Gvardiol, although the chance of him being rotated are slightly less than the other options that you will see in this 15-man squad from Manchester City at least. But let's now go for the rest of the midfielders, and one of them is still the standard template, Mohamed Salah, who went down in price to 13.7 million overnight, and I think against Arsenal he is still a great captaincy shout. You'll see my final top 10 list with the graphics in tomorrow's deadline stream, and I think Salah is another superb option against Crystal Palace at home in Gameweek 38, so he still makes it here, and you can go against him and the likes of Isak up front, who have such high ownership. In the case of Salah, it's around 70% still, and Isak has 60% ownership. So you can sell these players and go really differential and kind of back against the template completely. But I'd still recommend keeping at least one of those options. And I personally think Salah will have a good end to this season, despite some poor performances and output since blank Gameweek 29, with only one goal in the Premier League. But the fifth and final midfielder is going to be a budget option here, who's not going to double, of course. There was a chance that Aston Villa would have had 2 games in 36, but that's no longer the case, and this is really just an enabler to facilitate the rest of your squad, and he could be benched for your 3 forwards and the other 4 midfielders. So Morgan Rogers does make it. He is a template pick, to be fair, but you can still go for Jacob Murphy, who has similar ownership at this moment in time. Anthony Elanga has a great fixture this week, so you might want to target it completely and instead remove one of those Forest defenders. That could be another play that you can definitely aim for. Chris Wood up front is also worth the investment, so you can structure things a little bit differently with this wildcard team. But I've gone for Morgan Rogers, and he has scored against some of his upcoming opponents, like Tottenham earlier this season, in a 4-1 defeat. But the main appeal of this midfield is going to be those 4 consistent performers in Bowen, Mbeumo, De Bruyne, and Mohamed Salah. Arguably the best forward in FPL right now is Wissa, and combining him with Mbeumo simultaneously is a differential play still. The EO, effective ownership of having both players, will still be quite low generally speaking, and that can really push you up the ranks, and that's another way you can use the wildcard to your advantage and rise up those ranks and the mini leagues. In terms of forwards, I think there are many options right now. Alexander Isak still stands out despite not having the best of fixtures. Matheus Cunha has been brilliant since his return from suspension, and you've also got Chris Wood, who hasn't had the form, but the fixtures look very appealing, and Leicester at home this week makes him a decent captaincy option for Gameweek 36, and I think it's very tough to narrow it down to 3 players. But in this wildcard draft, I've gone for Alexander Isak, who is template, and I know you might be a little bit against that, having Salah and Isak in this team, but you do have differentials elsewhere, and lower owned players with 10 to 15% ownership like Bowen, De Bruyne and Visser, and we could see this rise by the end of the Gameweek 36 deadline tomorrow, and they might become somewhat template picks at some stage. But I think there's a very strong foundation, and you've also got some different structural points like the triple up in the Forest defense, which can really help you, especially for those bench boosting in Gameweek 37 or who just want to target that Leicester at home fixture in Gameweek 36. But the final forward is Matheus Cunha, and if you want to go about things a little bit differently, you might want to go for Chris Wood instead of Isak, and then remove a Forest defender for William Saliba, for example, and then start him in Gameweek 38 against Southampton away if you really want that Arsenal coverage for the final Gameweek of this season and you're backing the Gunners to go all out and have a good performance there, because it has been lacking for quite a while, at least combining the performance and the results simultaneously. But I do like this 15-man squad overall. You've got plenty of captaincy options in every single Gameweek remaining. You've got template picks who are very consistent, but you've also got differentials and a few different things about this team that can really help you. And Matheus Cunha is a bonus points machine, just like Chris Wood. But I would argue that Cunha's ceiling is higher over the next 3 Gameweeks overall compared to Chris Wood. The starting 11 for Gameweek 37 would be as follows. Matt Sells will be in goal, facing Leicester at home, and we're going all in on Nottingham Forest with Milenkovic and Nico Williams. Gavardio completes the defensive line, facing Southampton away, and you have Bowen away to Man United, De Bruyne facing Southampton away, and you might even be tempted to add a triple up in that Man City team. Do you risk it with Marmoush or Haaland up front? That is definitely going to be a debate that I'll talk about in more detail in tomorrow's deadline stream. Brian Mbeumo and Visser facing Ipswich Town away from home, Salah facing Arsenal at home, Isak at home facing Chelsea, and Cunha facing Brighton, who he did very well against in the reverse fixture. You've also got Pickford, Rodgers, Aït-Nouri and O'Brien on the bench. And for Gameweek 37, for those on the bench boost, you could have Sells in goal facing West Ham away, and of course Nico Williams with the same fixture, Rodgers facing Tottenham at home, and Aït-Nouri facing Crystal Palace away. And you've got Pickford and O'Brien facing Southampton at home in your starting 11. You've got Milenkovic facing West Ham away, Gavardio and De Bruyne facing Bournemouth at home, Bowen facing Nottingham Forest at home. So there's a bit of a clash there, but you could still see some points being awarded to you in one way, shape or form. Mbeumo and Visser facing Fulham at home, and Brentford have a good record against Fulham. You've got Cunha away to Crystal Palace, Isak facing Arsenal away, and Salah facing Brighton away, and he might be the best captain for Gameweek 37, but we'll talk about that next week, of course. And I've got roughly 0.2 million in the bank, but some of you watching might have even more money in the bank to make a few improvements or tweak things according to your preferences. And for Gameweek 38, you also have a solid platform with Sells and Milenkovic facing Chelsea at home. By this stage, you can make some transfers to maybe change that a little bit and go for the Arsenal defender, or from the get-go on the Gameweek 36 wildcard, as I mentioned before, you can pick David Raya in goal, or perhaps go for an Arsenal defender like William Saliba facing Southampton away. You've got Aït-Nouri facing Brentford at home and Gavardio facing Fulham away. The same goes for De Bruyne, and of course Cunha, Mbeumo and Visser all take part in the same game. Bowen facing Ipswich Town away is a nice differential, and I wouldn't mind him for the captaincy. Salah facing Crystal Palace at home, and Isak facing Everton at home. So the expected points is quite high in every single game week, and for those bench boosting in Gameweek 37, this wildcard team will really help you. But just to visualize things using this website, FPL.team, for those that maybe aren't bench boosting in 37 or want to balance things out a little bit more in their defensive line, one thing you can do here is go for Saliba instead of Milenkovic, and then we can do something a little bit different here. So instead of Isak, for example, we can go for Chris Wood. And that makes it very affordable. In fact, I've got 0.8 million now left in the bank, and that means you can also make a few other incremental upgrades according to your liking. So here, I'll definitely bench Saliba, by the way, just to make this abundantly clear. And Aït-Nouri did score against Brighton last time out. I think Wolves were 2-0 down, and Aït-Nouri sparked the comeback there. So he can be in the starting 11 for Gameweek 36. For 37, Saliba against Newcastle home isn't great, but Arsenal still have a solid defence overall. And then for Gameweek 38, you've got Saliba away to Southampton, and Chris Wood has good fixtures overall. But that's kind of some ideas there for you for the last 3 Gameweeks of the season. And of course, you can go for a lower owned defender than Saliba from the Arsenal team, or perhaps cover a different club entirely. It's completely up to you how you want to play this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Are you aiming to triple up on a certain team defensively, like Nottingham Forest, or would you rather have an Elanga in the midfield or Chris Wood up front to diversify things a little bit with your team structure? And maybe you're going for even bigger differentials in terms of transfers in certain areas, but all your thoughts can be left in the comment section down below, and let's continue the conversation across all my social media platforms. We have approached the end of this wildcard video for Gameweek 36. We are very close to the end of this season, but everything you need to know for Fantasy Premier League and UCL Fantasy will be covered on this channel. And be sure to tune in for tomorrow's deadline stream, because all the team news, injury updates, and more graphics will be provided, so you get the ultimate FPL experience, and all your questions will be answered in the most interactive deadline stream you'll find anywhere on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for yet another FPL deadline stream where I'll answer hundreds of your questions and make sure you're well prepared for the upcoming deadline. And don't forget, more UCL Fantasy videos and live streams will be headed your way towards the end of this month.